The United States is known for their beautiful and iconic national parks, some of the most famous being Yellowstone National Park with over 4.8 million visitors and Yosemite National Park attracting over 4.5 million visitors in 2021. Overall, the National Park Service with 401 national parks reports over 300 million visitors during the year of 2022 alone and protecting over 130,000 square miles of land. National parks represent a core aspect of the United States, providing recreation for tens of millions of Americans and attracting tourists from across the world to admire the beauty of nature. However, national parks are relatively new in U.S. history, as a focus for nature and the preservation of nature was generally eclipsed by the pursuit of American expansion. During the 19th century, the United States began to expand exponentially in both total land and population, with much of the eastern United States fully claimed and developed by the people residing there. As stated before, there was little focus on preserving the natural scenery in the surrounding area. A great example of the failure to preserve nature was the presence of industrial development and pollution of the iconic Niagara Falls. However, the United States began to expand westward. A new respect for nature was fomenting within the American public, and soon a desire to preserve the beauties of nature was a reality. In addition to, the huge amount of land acquired by the United States made it almost impossible for any attempt to exploit the land. I'm not going to talk about the more iconic national parks that I mentioned before, like Yellowstone or Yosemite National Park. Those national parks are recognized worldwide for their beauty, and the scenery present within those parks justify their own existence. Today, I want to discuss a missing national park that was nearly established but ultimately fell through the cracks. Located in the Pacific Northwest of the United States in southern Idaho is the beautiful and iconic Shoshone Falls and accompanying state park located approximately 3 miles away from the city of Twin Falls, Idaho. Often referred to as Niagara of the West, the falls towers over 200 feet in height, which is approximately 45 feet higher than Niagara Falls. The rim of the waterfall stretches over 1,000 feet in width, truly remarkable and a natural wonder in terms of both beauty and uniqueness, as the waterfall's roaring is sharply juxtaposed by the black volcanic rock surrounding the falls. Shoshone Falls was formed relatively recently in geological terms, as the falls were formed from an unimaginably large flood that devastated southern Idaho nearly 14,000 years ago. The flood stemmed from an outburst flood from the prehistoric Lake Bonneville, which almost encompassed the entire state of Utah. Without going too far down the prehistoric hydrology rabbit hole, which is a fun rabbit hole to go down if you ever have time, basically, the massive lake began to pour into the Snake River at Red Rock Pass and violently aided in carving a massive canyon that stretches across southern Idaho and eventually draining into the Columbia River. In fact, since most of the rocks surrounding the Snake River plain are porous layers of rhyolite basalt, which allows for groundwater to pour into the canyon at many different spots, making Snake River Canyon econic for their many waterfalls like Thousand Springs, Twin Falls, and most notably Shoshone Falls. Just as unique its geology, its ecology is equally as fascinating. To better frame the uniqueness of Shoshone Falls ecology, let me discuss the effects of mountains on terrestrial ecology. Mountains act as a barrier for migration for terrestrial plants and wildlife, as mountains separate previously congruent or combined areas and their populations, leading to diversification of wildlife between two areas and allows for different niches of evolution for wildlife to claim, therefore allowing mountain regions to diversify rapidly and create longer-lasting stability for the ecosystems. Now, going back to Shoshone Falls, due to the large height of Shoshone Falls, they act as an aquatic mountain to the aquatic ecology of the area, despite being a part of the same river. Shoshone Falls divides the ecoregion into two distinct populations with very little overlap. Throughout most of the Snake River's history, the lower Snake River, or all of the Snake River west of Shoshone Falls connecting to the Columbia River, was home to a large variety of anadromous fish which lived in the ocean as adults, however returned to freshwater to spawn. Now, if you're someone who knows their United States geography decently well, you would probably be asking yourself, what are anadromous fish doing so far away from the nearest coast? To better imagine this, that's over 500 miles away from the Pacific Ocean. So how are they getting this far? I mentioned it slightly earlier, but the Snake River eventually pours into the Columbia River, which creates the border between Oregon and Washington. And if you follow that river, the Columbia River eventually connects to the Pacific Ocean, allowing for enormous possibilities of ecological diversification. The Columbia River is the reason why Shoshone Falls used to be a historical barrier for anadromous fish like salmon and rainbow trout, and that river played a vital role for migratory fish like the sturgeon. The Upper Snake River is equally as unique, as the ecoregion of the upper is completely defined by a new region with characteristics more like freshwater ecoregions because of its lack of connection to any ocean body of water. The Upper Snake River joins the Bonneville Basin ecoregion, originating from a prehistoric lake from which it gets its name from. This area is characterized by its closed drainage system that does not make any connection to the ocean with Shoshone Falls, being the barrier that separates two ecoregions and creating two different ecosystems within the same area. Truly a unique and fascinating aspect of Idaho Shoshone Falls State Park, and of course, this was before the arrival of European explorers and the eventual establishment of multiple dams and towns that depended on the literal power of the falls. Today, unfortunately, salmon and many other anadromous fish are unable to reach their historical limit at Shoshone Falls, as more and more Americans will continue to push westward and develop their communities. Long before Europeans expanded into the West, the indigenous people of the area have appreciated the beauty of Shoshone Falls for potentially thousands of years. The waterfall's namesake stemmed from the Lemhi Shoshone of the region, who traditionally lived in the Lemhi River Valley and along the upper Salmon River in Idaho. The Shoshone people heavily depended on fishing as their primary food source, and therefore the Shoshone Falls played a pivotal part in their culture and neighboring cultures. As we discussed earlier, the historical limit of Shoshone Falls and other anadromous fish would end at Shoshone Falls, allowing for a reliable and predictable food source that would open for opportunities for trading with nearby cultures. Throughout spring and summer, northwest of Twin Falls, there was a rather regular gathering of nearby indigenous groups who would gather to exchange goods and partake in the surplus of fish present in the Snake River. Different regional groups of the Shoshone from northern Utah and central Idaho would visit, in addition to the Nez Perce, Flathead, and the Paiute peoples, often visited during the summer months to visit Shoshone Falls and partake in both the beauty of Shoshone Falls and the plentiful supply of aquatic resources. Due to Shoshone Falls' relative isolation, European and Americans had no documented sighting until 1847 by a Catholic bishop. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation on this one. Bishop Augustin Magloire Blanchet and a group of immigrants traversing the Oregon Trail. They were traveling along the north side of the Snake River and decided to make a detour, perhaps someone who was familiar with the area like a hunter or a trapper. A regiment of U.S. soldiers led by Lieutenant Andrew Lindsay and accompanied by a geologist and writer George Gibbs. They were guided by a local indigenous person when they were shown the falls. Gibbs drew the first image of Shoshone Falls and designated its new name that we know it as today. The area remained relatively quiet for the next 20 years as many people deemed the area to be more trouble than it was ultimately worth. However, that would change with the discovery of gold in 1869 near Shoshone Falls. Like so many other areas throughout the West, gold brought an explosion of growth to the area, with well over 3,000 miners arriving in southern Idaho in hope to enrich themselves. The boom quickly ended due to the geology of the area making gold extraction far too labor-intensive, especially without railroad or other forms of industrialization. When the Oregon Short Line was extended to Shoshone in 1883, travel in the area became increasingly effective and allowed for another wave of immigration. I would argue the establishment of the railroad is what ultimately sealed the fate of the Snake River and Shoshone Falls, as the railroad brought over many prospective entrepreneurs who saw opportunity in the area. Ira Burton Prine being one of the prime examples. In Twin Falls, Idaho, Prine is a name known by nearly every citizen in Twin Falls, and most likely throughout all of southern Idaho because of his role he played in developing southern Idaho and the iconic Prine Bridge, which is also famous nationwide for being the 8th highest bridge in the United States. However, back to Prine. He is best known for his involvement in massive irrigation projects which brought life to the nutrient-dense but arid soil throughout southern Idaho, turning the valley green and making wide-scale agriculture a feasible possibility, deeming the southern Idaho region as the Magic Valley. The name Magic Valley was given because the irrigation's ability to make seemingly nothing into a thriving community. However, that couldn't be farther from the truth. In reality, irrigating the Snake River came at a great cost for the local ecology and scenery. with investors from Salt Lake City, Prine and other local businessmen incorporated a Twin Falls Land and Water Company and filed claims for water rights for nearly 500,000 acres of land, which normally would be an impossible task due to regulations of the Homestead Act. In order to circumnavigate this issue, companies like the Twin Falls Water Company and many other business owners lobbied for the establishment of the Carey Act, which allow for private companies in the United States to erect irrigation systems in western semi-arid states and profit from the sales of water. The Carey Act would also serve as a proverbial nail in the coffin for the future Shoshone Falls. A local national push to establish Shoshone Falls as a national park was being discussed within Congress and could secure the future of Shoshone Falls and the Snake River. The Chicago Tribune contained a full-page announcement containing photos of Shoshone Falls, Twin Falls, and the Blue Lakes in hope for the announcement of Shoshone Falls National Park. In addition to, included articles describing the area as a Yellowstone or Yosemite with, quote, some of the most beautiful scenery in the world. The project park would be massive and encompass a vast majority of southern Idaho, with approximately 25 townships being withdrawn for the establishment of the park, with some propositions extending as far as Redfish Lakes closer to central Idaho. The proposed project would be on a similar scale to Yellowstone National Park and serve as a vital area of conservation for aquatic and terrestrial populations and a valuable source of recreation within Idaho. However, would severely hinder the economic capability of Idaho, especially southern Idaho. With the establishment of the Carey Act, the Twin Falls Water Company applied to irrigate a large amount of the land surrounding the Twin Falls area, creating a direct conflict of interest with the national park. Idaho Representative Edgar Wilson, being one of the most fervent opposers to the national park, pleaded with the Commissioner of the General Land Office in order to abandon the national parks project, arguing the area was useless for park purposes. Ultimately, his arguments did not fall on deaf ears, as the commissioner agreed with his pleas, and the possibility for Shoshone Falls becoming a national park would be abandoned forever. After the future of the Snake River water rights were guaranteed, a massive construction campaign went underway, with most notable development being Miller Dam, located near present-day Burley. The dam opened on March 1st, 1905, and ultimately sealed the future for Shoshone Falls, as the dam diverted the Snake River and allowed thousands of miles of canal to fill rapidly. The night of the filling, it was stated that Shoshone Falls went dry, filling over 200,000 acres of land. Shortly after 1907, an additional dam was finished upstream for Shoshone Falls, and further reducing the amount of water flowing over the falls. Since then, there's been numerous dams placed on the Snake River in order to harness the power in the form of literal electrical power and agricultural productivity from hundreds of thousands of acres of land that depend on the Snake River. Due to the large agricultural demand, the water levels of the Snake River can vary dramatically, and therefore the flow of the beauty of Shoshone Falls is often sacrificed for the community. There's been many times where Shoshone Falls has practically dried up, and being from this area, seeing Shoshone Falls dried up is a truly heartbreaking experience, and I'm sure a huge disappointment to the thousands of people from across the world who come to visit the miracle of nature. There have been efforts to make improvements to the dams in the area, notably the dam directly upstream from Shoshone Falls, to ensure that the falls will still maintain a constant flow rate. However, with the unpredictability of climate change, the future of Shoshone Falls depends on our ability to properly manage the water flow and the water rights to the area. In addition to, the ecology of the area has permanently been disrupted due to human interference. Andromed's fish cannot traverse as far as Shoshone Falls anymore, severing the historical connection and importance of fishing in the region. I'm not here to discuss whether we should have sacrificed numerous communities throughout southern Idaho, the very community that I grew up with, for the establishment of a national park, and I'm not going to shame the decisions made in the past. Ultimately, whether if I believe there should have been a national park or not does not really matter anymore, since no matter what efforts we make, we will never be able to restore Shoshone Falls to their former glory. However, that doesn't mean we should forget the history of Shoshone Falls and the importance of the falls to the area, to both the indigenous people of the area and the European explorers and artists who popularized the falls to the public. The people of Southern Idaho and their communities are only possible because of the Snake River and Shoshone Falls, and we need to make an effort to preserve the history and beauty for future generations to enjoy. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. This is the first time ever doing a video essay, and I put a lot of work into it, so again, thank you for the support. I really do appreciate it. I'm working on other projects on historical sites in Southern Idaho, and if you like this video, make sure to subscribe in order to see any other future projects that I might be working on. I would also like to give a huge shout out to my friend Ivan, who provided all the footage of the canyon with his drone. If you liked his camera work, a link to his channel will be in the description. In addition to, I would like to highlight Dr. Jim Gentry, professor of history at the College of Southern Idaho and author of the book In the Middle and On the Edge, the Twin Falls region of Idaho. Gentry's book highlights the deep and rich history of the Magic Valley, and his book is what inspired me to discuss the history of Shoshone Falls. Dr. Gentry has written a few books about the history of Southern Idaho and is a valuable asset to our community. Again, thank you for everyone for watching, and stay tuned for the future projects that I'm working on.